because tonight we have a trial and error special.
If the judges think they've closed the file on the ice cream wars, they're wrong. For 6 years, we have been uncovering the full extent of a conviction that disgraces Scottish justice. And now at last, we can reveal it. It began one winter's evening 14 years ago in the bleak outer suburbs of Glasgow. A teenager called Andrew Doyle, Fat Boy Doyle to friends and enemies alike, was in charge of the ice cream van, a mobile shop selling groceries around the streets of Garthamlock. Doyle drove the van while a schoolgirl served the customers. It could be a dangerous occupation. There was a war on. Fat Boy Doyle survived this battle of Glasgow's ice cream wars, only to lose the war itself. In Easter week 1984, he was murdered. So were 5 other members of the Doyle family who died after someone set fire to the flat in which they lived. It was a crime with consequences that were to spread beyond the tragedy itself. For we believe that those responsible have never been brought to justice, and that 2 men innocent of it have already spent more than a decade behind bars. Now we can tell the full story of a crime that shocked Scotland and of a conviction which, to the despair of many who believe in the superior quality of Scots justice, was upheld this week. The council estates of Glasgow, or the schemes as they're known in Scotland, were built with the best of intentions. An escape from the squalor of Victorian slum tenements, a chance to breathe fresh air, a place to bring up children free from disease, poverty, crime and corruption. That was the intention. These are the schemes. There are few amenities here. Few shops flourish, there's not much money around, and the premises are vulnerable to vandalism. So the travelling vans provide a necessary service. There's money in a van round. Back in the 80s, where this story begins, a good round could net you £200 clear profit a week. That's if you could keep your patch to yourself. Rivals were not welcome. Competition was discouraged. So when Agnes Lafferty took her van into the Garthamlock scheme, she knew the established vans would treat her as a trespasser.
Well, on the first day there was 5 competition vans brought into the area. Eventually, I think after about a week, there was a 3rd van brought in permanently, and his job was to follow me, and wherever I stopped, for him to stop, to take as much business away from me as possible.
Sometimes the tactics took a more sinister turn.
Smashing windows, like letting tires down, maybe the odd hole on the side, you know what I mean? It's going to cost them enough money to get back on the road again, if they could get back on the road again. But it seemed to lose most interest. They wouldn't come back into the scheme again. It cost them too much.
I didn't realise there was a threat until such times as my ice cream van had been, 3 men or 4 men had stopped in a car in front of it, jumped out and smashed the windscreen with baseball bats or pick shaft handles, I don't know which it was.
But the shotgun attack on Fat Boy Doyle's van represented a significant and terrifying turn for the worse.
I was standing at the living room window and I looked out the window, and there was a machete ice cream van parked up next to that white car up there.
Just where that white car is?
Yeah, and a brown, beige coloured big car drove up beside the ice cream van, and somebody came out the passenger seat with something in it, something like fire on him, and right in front of the van and shot at the window.
And 7 weeks after the shotgun attack against Fat Boy Doyle's van, the violence reached a terrible climax. It was in the small hours of Monday, April the 16th, the week before Easter. Andrew Doyle lived with his family in his parents' 3-bedroom flat in Bank End Street. It was on the top floor. The flat was unusually crowded that night. 6 people died in the fire, one of them a child of 18 months.
There was like a banging, like a loud banging, then just heard all the glass smashing. It must have been the fire, the heat breaking the glass, and then we heard the screaming, the shouting for help. There was a boy actually who ran right up the stairs and tried to get in, but he couldn't get in. The flames were too fierce. The guy was beaten back right away. There was no way he could get in. He had to get himself killed if he even went near it. And the black smoke itself, because when a couple of the family were brought out to the ambulance, some of them were only in their shorts, and their whole bodies were pure black with smoke.
Glasgow's a tough city, it's seen a lot, but there was shock at the wanton ferocity of this attack on an innocent family. A team of 50 police officers was seconded to the Ice Cream Wars murders. Over the weeks, they'd interview some 1,500 people, take 4,000 statements. Bank End Street, the scene of the fire, overlooks Barlinnie Prison, one of Scotland's toughest jails. Hardened criminals, or Neds as they're known north of the border, know that even behind bars they have one negotiable asset: information. Barlinnie's Sea Hall is an unofficial clearinghouse for criminal gossip. And there was one prisoner who seemed to have a lot to say about the Doyle family fire.
You know why we're here, don't you? I want to ask a couple of questions.
William Love was in prison on suspicion for an armed robbery. He told the police he'd been part of a campaign against Doyle. He said he'd been paid by a relative of a local hard man who also ran a van, Thomas Campbell, known locally as TC. And more critically, Love told them he had information about the fire in which the Doyle family died, the first real lead the police had in the case. Love said he'd overheard a conversation in a local bar, the Netherfield. 3 weeks before the fire, Love said there'd been talk of setting fire to the door of the flat where Doyle lived to give him a fright. Among the plotters, TC, Thomas Campbell, that name again. Love had a string of convictions for serious crimes and was facing a long sentence on the armed robbery charge. After helping the police, and unusually given the gravity of the charge he was facing, Love walked free after objections to his bail were suddenly dropped. The authorities said they'd freed him for his own protection. The underworld assumed a deal. Love had grassed up a couple of other Neds in a deal for freedom. And so does one of Glasgow's leading criminal lawyers.
No doubt whatsoever about that. He lied, and he made a deal with the prosecution. When the High Court refused bail, to someone who's charged with armed robbery on the basis that he's too dangerous to inflict upon the public, and all of a sudden the prosecuting authorities who are opposing his bail withdraw that opposition, that's a deal. It has to be a deal. There's no other word